Hello, everyone, and welcome along to a bit of an impromptu Wednesday night podcast with the TII team. My name is Craig Dennett, and I'm your host this evening, who would much rather be sat freezing cold in Ibrox watching Rangers add another 3 points to their league total. Sadly, I'm at home, and good thing is we're about to talk about Rangers anyway, and to do just that, I'm joined by Ross. How are we doing, Ross?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, Craig. I'm absolutely full of chocolate, to be honest with you. It's that time of year, isn't it? But other than that, yeah, I'm good.
I'm also joined by Tommy as well, who's informed us he's full of cheese and port. So a different kind of indulgence.
Very much a different kind of indulgence. I was going to say you two are full of something else, but let's stick with chocolate and Christmas cheer.
We already know that. The listeners already know that, and yet they keep coming back for more. So it's always a positive sign. But yes, we are here. We would all actually be at Ibrox if the game was going ahead, but sadly it was not. Plenty of adverse weather going about in Scotland today, particularly in the Highlands, I believe, anywhere north of Aberdeen. So it's sadly the game's been called off. Means we've got 2 games in hand on Celtic. But there's plenty of positives to be taken. More rest time for Rangers, which I see has been winding a few people up on social media. No more injuries, which is another positive to take from it. But Ross, starting with yourself, how did you the kind of we heard some rumours fairly early doors today about the fact that Ross County hadn't actually left Dingwall, despite it being about 10 this morning. The weather was getting worse and worse, plenty of snow and stuff like that, and it was actually going to be a struggle for them to make it. How did you feel when you heard it was finally called off?
Yeah, probably a bit mixed, to be honest. I think at this stage of the season with the games in hand, you probably just want to get the points on the board. But then you're such an important fixture this season, this coming weekend, should I say, that, yeah, I can see both sides of it in terms of positive and negative. I think for me, at this time of the year, if a game's cancelled, me personally, I'm not too bothered. It's time to spend with family and things anyway. So I wasn't absolutely devastated, to be honest with you, Craig. But I think in terms of Rangers season, I think it would have been good to get the points, get the 3 points, because I think we would have probably dealt with Ross County pretty comfortably. So yeah, a little bit of disappointment, but ultimately Philippe Clement gets a couple more recovery days in. He'll be looking at this. He'll try and make the most of it in terms of positive sides and try and get as many players back as fit as possible. But yeah, a little bit mixed on it, Craig, but I think I'll get on with it. At this time of the year, I think there's plenty of other things for us to be doing and look forward to this weekend.
Yeah, I reached the point in my Christmas holidays where I was actually, that was my one thing I had to do today, was to go to Ibrox. So it kind of took that away from me. I've just sat watching films all day. So yeah, but glad to be on here talking about Rangers. Tommy, I think I'm probably in the opposite side from Ross in terms of, I probably think it's not a good thing that the game was called off. I'd much rather have the points on the board. Fair enough, you get a wee bit more rest, but even as an amateur footballer at a very low level, I hated when you turned up for a game and then it was called off, or you started to get ready to go to a game and it was called off last minute. It can't be that enjoyable for the players either, I guess, who have been preparing for this game for the last few days at least. But I'd much rather have the points on the board rather than the rest. How do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, before, if you believe some of the social media stuff, before Union Jack Frost stepped into the equation and made it impassable to come south to Ibrox, then yeah, listen, you're prepared for the game. I'm with you want to probably get the game done, actually. I think 1 game in hand, fine. 2, it starts to become a real thing. You actually just want to bank the points. As you said, the team had prepared. They'd been in Christmas Day and stuff like that. Philippe Clement was quite clear about that. So they've geared themselves up for it, geared themselves up for being in a certain position when they go to Parkhead as well on the 30th. I don't think that'll change, how we perform or anything like that, but it would be nice to get through it. You could easily play ghost of Ross County past, present and future here if you really wanted to, in terms of you could have got injuries, it could have been an upset, there could have been anything, right? Ultimately, it gets packed away, and as Philippe Clement is very clear about, you focus in the next game. So those 3 points, much like the other 3 points that we have in a game in hand, are not banked, right? I'm a big believer in until they're in the door, they're not in the door. And so the next 3 points is across the city, and that's the only ones that are important.
Yeah, Ross, we'll come on to a sort of wider preview of the Old Firm game that's coming up. I'm going to say on the 30th because I've lost track of days. So I'm just going to say on the 30th. We obviously head to Celtic Park with no away fans, and we'll discuss that as well. But how much of a psychological, I don't know if it's boost or if it actually goes the other way, having had a free week in the lead up to that game?
Well, you've definitely lost track of days, Craig, because I seen you right on Twitter earlier. It was on Sunday, the game, so you've definitely lost track of days. It's Saturday. Make sure you don't miss it.
To be fair to Craig, I did the exact same thing earlier today as well. When I was looking at the diary, I went, "Oh, that's fine." I was asking my wife, "Are you out on Saturday?" I think that's not the case. I was like, "All right, okay, aye, fine." Anyway, yeah, there we go. I've lost track of days as well. Are you on a podcast?
Yeah.
Anymore?
I won't hold it against you too much because I'm exactly the same at this time of year. Yeah, I mean, psychologically, I'm not too sure because I think a lot was being made of Celtic having an extra. I think someone had actually worked out yesterday. I can't remember. It was 24, 36 hours. I can't remember, right? But someone had worked out they had quite a bit of a gap and quite a bit more recovery time than we did. And I suppose psychologically, Celtic might look at that as a big advantage. I didn't really look at that myself, to be honest with you. I think we've seen over the years, especially with this Rangers squad, that they seem to do better when the schedule's packed. You know, we've seen it in European games. They come back into the SPFL and they look good for it. If they seem to get that week break, I don't know what it is, because you would imagine for athletes at that level, professional sportsmen, you would expect them to savour that rest and you'd see their best from it. But we just don't seem to get that from our squad. So psychologically, it might be a wee bit of a dent to Rangers just in terms of they wanted to keep that momentum going, the rhythm. We obviously are playing very well at the moment, getting a lot of good results. Team's really starting to gel, and that's with a lot of injuries included in there as well. But I think, like I said in the first question, Craig, I think Philippe Clement will try and find the positives out of this. If he gets a couple more days of working in the training field, which he's not been able to do, and we spoke about that quite a lot in terms of on the training pitch itself, they've not been able to do a lot. And we've heard that from previous managers coming in mid-season, right? It's not the time of the year to really put your stamp on a team. So maybe that's given them a wee bit more license to do that over the next couple of days. And it is an important game, right? You're going to prepare for Celtic very differently than you prepare for the rest, because you're coming up against a side that are arguably just as good as you, right? So it's not so much about how you're going to break down a low block. It's very much how you're going to deal with their threats, as well as trying to get the most out of our own. So yeah, psychologically, I think the team will be in a good place. I don't think this will really put them off it. But I agree with what Tommy said before. You'd rather get the points on the board, but unfortunately, we can't do anything about it. We just got to go on with it now.
Yeah, just one last point on this. I guess postponed game, Tommy, tonight against Ross County, before we move on to start looking ahead to the weekend. And a wee bit on Philippe Clement and his time at Rangers so far, what we've liked, what we've disliked, and if there is anything that you've disliked. I was trying to think of something earlier on, and I'm not sure there's anything come through to me just yet. But just on the Ross County point, obviously Derek Adams made a big song and dance about the professionalism of the Scottish League compared to, I think it was Morecambe in League Two that he was at beforehand, and the standard of football. The fact that Ross County were going to be travelling 4 hours by bus on the day of a game, when it was forecast for heavy snow, it speaks volumes at times for how this league is run, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, I've got a slight bit of sympathy for them. Probably won't get a lot of credit from the listeners or watchers here, but in terms of if they thought they could do it, the weather's maybe the important part there. I can understand any club outside of Rangers and Celtic to some extent not want to spend on hotels. Right? Yeah. Lots of clubs, particularly like Ross County, working on tight budgets. Right? So I get it to an extent. Your point is the most valid one, though. The weather warnings were very clear. Nobody thought it was going to be sunshine on the way down the A9 or whatever it is. So yeah, even if they'd have came a little bit, come the 2 hours, stay in a cheaper hotel, travel the last 2 hours into Glasgow, whatever. Asking your team to travel 4 hours on a coach on a day of a game, it's a bit of an odd one as well. But not exactly the most impressive advert for our league. Oh look, we didn't bother to stay over and the game's cancelled because people can't pass that motorway. Right, Magic, welcome to Scottish football.
Yeah, absolutely. It is what it is at the end of the day. They got the game in hand. We played, I imagine, sometime late January, early February. If they can, we've already got the game away to Hibs to play and to make up from the cup final. So, as Tommy said, that's never an easy trip to Easter Road. We've done well there recently, but it's never an easy trip to Easter Road. So, till the points are on the board, you can't you can't guarantee them being in the bag. But having the opportunity, had we beaten Ross County tonight, to then go top of the league for at Celtic Park would have been a nice little cherry on top of the cake as we headed towards the winter break.
Sorry, could I just say maybe one thing we missed out there as a group, depending on when the other ones are scheduled in as well. It could be a slightly different looking Rangers team. There's not going to be wholesale changes, but there could be 1 or 2 players in the door, 1 or 2 players out. That's probably particularly relevant middle of the park and up front, centre forward, given the Danilo situation and stuff like that. So it could work in our favour, but that's a lottery, a throw the bones type of stuff. But it'd be good if Clement could get other people in by that point they come around.
Absolutely. To be fair, it'd be good if we could just get the squad fit. I think if we had a fit squad, then that would probably be helpful to.
Yeah, from a performance perspective, I know that's high on their agenda. They still don't believe behind the scenes that that's completely sorted, and that they are looking into that type of stuff. They've obviously got new performance people in. They're looking at all the options. They're really trying to be as data led as they can in the background. I think Philippe Clement has been as clear as he's probably willing to be in press conferences that he is absolutely dumbfounded and not happy with the previous regime's fitness approach. So yeah, anytime that he gets to do that, to Ross's point on the training pitch, getting people up to speed is a useful endeavour.
Yeah, I mean, we've all sat in press conferences with Philippe Clement. We know how much of a presence he has as a person. We know how almost the opposite from Michael Beale in terms of he doesn't say anything that he doesn't want to say or doesn't want you to hear. He's very he's basically played out the whole press conference in his head before he's even stepped in that room, and you can tell that at times as well. He's a very intimidating is probably the wrong word, but he does have that aura about him. It's very impressive when you are in the room with him, and his performances have shown that that's having an impact in the dressing room and the team as well. As we started to go through it, Ross, just having a look a bit about Philippe Clement and his story so far at Rangers. Have you been impressed with him as a manager? Probably a fairly easy question to start with.
I think that's the easiest question I've ever had in this podcast, Craig. To be honest,
hold on a minute. I'm going to get something terrible off the back of this.
Yeah, I've definitely been impressed by Philippe Clement. I think I've said this before in the podcast actually, that I was originally quite surprised by the changes he made and impact he made, like how quickly he was able to do it. But then actually looking at his CV, it shouldn't really be a surprise, because a lot of the clubs he went into weren't doing so well, and he was able to turn it around very quickly and then bring success the following season. Of course, we're hoping for success this season. He's already done that. He's already secured the League Cup, which is, I think when he was appointed, I think you were on the podcast with me, Tommy, I really reiterated how important that League Cup was going to be. Probably because just in recent history we've seen for Michael Beale that he wasn't able to get it, and really it spiraled from them. That he lost the trust of the fans, and I think Philippe Clement really recognised himself that was important, and he's went for it, and he's ensured the team was ready for it that day, and they performed and they delivered. So overall, I've been really impressed with him. I still think there's more to come. I think we spoke about this after Motherwell the other day. I still think there's another gear for this Rangers team to hit. And I think that's really encouraging in terms of where we are right now. You're back in a title race, which I think, if we're all honest, when Philippe Clement was appointed, we probably felt the league was gone. If most people are honest, they probably felt the league was gone in Scotland. A 7-8 point gap. It's pretty big. It's difficult to turn around. He's been able to do that. Of course, you talk about the other side of the city and they've hit bad form, but we still have to pick up the points, and we've done that in difficult situations as well. So I've been really, really impressed with him. And like I said, Craig, there's another gear on this Rangers team. I'm looking forward to when he really has a fully fit squad. I think he is as well. He talks about that a lot at his press conferences. I think he's really getting sick of it now, like talking about injuries. So it's quite clear the frustrations he had. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing a fully fit squad. Hopefully bringing some signings in January and we kick on again, because I think there's a lot more to come.
Yeah, Tommy Scott Hammond's in the comments and says Beale couldn't get a performance out the players he brought in. Big Phil's done just that. How surprised have you been that he's been able to take the squad that was underperforming so badly in the first sort of 10, 12 games of the season to then turn them around in such a fashion so quickly, to get to where we are just now? And even that's even with the number of injuries that we've had to the squad, and that seem to rack up more and more every single game.
Yeah, I think it is surprising. I'm not going to duplicate what Ross has just said there as well, but Philippe Clement was very clear when he first came in the door. The first time I'm going to work in on his mentality. And I've said this in the podcast before as well, that getting into that really quickly is an art, right? And he's done that with his team as well. What I really like about him is he's had a quick look and went, right, I'll be pragmatic first. I just need points on the board. Right, just drag this team over the line, get a bit of a good feeling, get a bit of momentum. Then you take on the set pieces like big wins against Betis, big win in the League Cup final as well. To the Michael Beale comparison point, and it's not fair, I suppose, to some extent, to compare them, right? Because they are very much different people and different levels.
But they're using the same tools, I guess, though. They're not. They're using this exact same squad. So that's just how do they approach it, and that's then a sign of their quality of him as a manager.
Yeah, I mean, you could go down the track of the fact that Michael Beale identified them and he wanted them. I'm not defending Michael Beale there. It's actually a slightly wider answer in that comparing their styles and their level of approach, etc., to the fact that Philippe Clement's getting a better tune out of him. Yeah, I don't disagree. I completely agree with you on that, and that's one of Michael Beale's downfalls. He brought them in but couldn't get them to perform to any great level. What Philippe Clement has over Michael Beale, there's a big list, right? But he's credible. In the two parts that you need to be credible, you need to talk a good game, particularly in the modern era where it's sound bites and it's social media and it's podcasts and it's press conferences, and that engenders a certain level of confidence in the support. Look, we've got a guy who knows what he's doing, but that needs to be backed up by the level of results and winning well, winning dirty, all that type of good stuff. Philippe Clement has both of those parts, right? And he's also fairly realistic when he says in press conferences, for example, there's going to be ups and downs. We won't win everything. People need to come with us. So he's looked at that squad. He knows there needs to be changes. This is not Philippe Clement's version 3 squad. It's his version 1, and they're doing enough, right? We shouldn't, think that they're playing stellar football, and that's not a criticism. They're doing enough. Once he really gets into it, I think we'll play a really attractive brand of football. We'll certainly be a lot more front foot because he'll want more pressing players and he wants to play high up the pitch in 95% of games. But yeah, I mean, he's incredibly credible. And it's been a while since I think we had a naturalistic, credible manager who could actually deliver as well and had that little bit of I'm with you, it's not fear or intimidation or anything like that, but a respect factor that people walk into a room. I think when you meet Philippe Clement or you see him in the room, he's somebody you look at and you go, I'll treat this conversation with a level of respect. We've seen that degraded across Rangers managers from the maybe from the Warburton era, certainly Pedro Caixinha, etc. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst maybe slightly different, but and obviously Steven Gerrard. It's nice to get back to those levels of respect again because that's what that suit deserves.
Yeah, Ross, that's an interesting point Tommy raises about the credibility that the Rangers manager possesses. It's a quality that we've always associated with the Rangers manager. That's almost the first thing you need before you even get the chance of a look in the door. It's something that I think, I suppose, was lacking in terms of presence. I found that with Gio. I found that with Michael Beale. Probably Steven Gerrard was the last one, and then before that, you're probably going back a wee bit as well before you find the one before that. I think it's I think it can't be underestimated how important that is. You've sat in press conferences with a few managers now. You've had the chance to ask them questions. You've had the chance just to watch them close up on the touchline and stuff like that. How much of a difference do you think that credibility makes, not only to how he's viewed by the players, but also by the fans themselves?
Well, I think this is interesting because probably the Michael Beale appointment has actually made me realise this myself, that it's probably more important as a Rangers manager to have that presence, that kind of aura you spoke about earlier, and the credibility. That's definitely something you give Philippe Clement. And I think what sets Philippe Clement different from especially the previous two managers we've had is I think he's recognised quickly how important the fans are when it comes to Rangers and the perception of this team. And it's something that I don't really think you would expect from a modern day manager. Most managers come in now, try to sell their philosophy, as they say, to the players, and they try and get everyone on board tactically. He's kind of taken a different approach to this, and he's really looked at it upon as, okay, I'll work on the team, but I need the fans. I need you to come with me. And he's addressed that really, really quickly. Everyone, I wouldn't say has fallen back in love with the team yet, right? But I think a lot of people have starting to find their love again, at least for this team, some of the players within it, especially, a trophy helps a long way with that. And I just think overall, his experience is oozing out of him. Like it's very clear that he recognises what needs to be done, especially at a top club like Rangers. He's obviously managed big clubs around Europe, okay? Club Brugge, of course, they're not the biggest club in the world, right? But in Belgium, they're expected to win. He's had that experience now. He's moved to Monaco. He's dealt with big players there. So all of this he's kind of brought into one, and he's brought it to Rangers, and we're getting the best out of it. So yeah, I've been really, really impressed with him. I think I agree with what you've both said there. When you're in press conferences with him, you really do feel a presence. He's pretty scary, to be honest with you. You definitely wouldn't want to get in the bad side of him, and I think that's important as well from a player perspective. There's got to be respect there, and it certainly is there. So. Overall, Craig, I'm buzzing with him, and I think the fans thing for me is huge because we haven't had that in a while. I think you're right. The last time we had that was Steven Gerrard, where I think a lot of the fans really kind of every word that came from Steven Gerrard you bought into. I don't think we had that with Van Bronckhorst, and we certainly didn't have it with Michael Beale towards the end. With Philippe Clement, you really trust him, and that's exactly what you need in a Rangers manager, I think.
Tommy, we've heard a lot of sort of stories or rumours from people who are close to the club or potentially have a bit of knowledge around the club about Philippe Clement's man management style and how potentially some of the players that have been underperforming or some of the players that haven't been doing so well up till the point he came in, he spent a lot of time with them and kind of talking them through how he wants them to play. I think Cyril Dessers spoke in a press conference around the fact that he's on the way to one of the European games. I can't remember if it was Aris or Betis away, but basically Philippe Clement had sat with him and they'd had a big chat for 20-30 minutes or so about how he wanted the striker to play, etc, etc, etc. That's a bit that we don't normally see or we don't normally get an insight into, but it's, for me, that's a hugely encouraging thing, and I think we're seeing that bear fruit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't particularly like some of the phraseology I'm about to use, right? But it's easy and it's trite. He's been a breath of fresh air. He's swept through the club. Every department has felt it, right? And that speaks to that man management as well. He's got a very clear understanding of what he wants, and I'm in that moment. And by that I mean he's someone who's very clear as well that he won't stop looking for the next little gain, for looking at the next player, for looking at the next upgrade. And that's an evolution thing. But in terms of his man management of everybody, not just the squad, but people who have dropped out, the B, other staff members, it's been felt right across the club. I've got that firsthand. People are really impressed by him, and he is very much what you see on screen. There is no, putting on the media face, and then he goes back to being Philippe Clement for the squad. And I think a lot of players believe in that as well because they're not dealing with somebody who's a bit changeable and who puts on a front. I think maybe previous manager might have been slightly in that camp, to be honest with you, trying to big up something else. As you said, Dessers, there's others who have spoken about not only is it just the man management side, but it's the support side, the arm around the shoulder, all that good stuff, but also quite willing to say to people and show them via images and videos, that's what I don't like. And then being quite ruthless when it's not carried out as well. We saw with the best will in the world, because he was very clear, he didn't throw his player under the bus in Todd Cantwell. He put him into a position. He wasn't carrying out his instructions. He tried to help him on the pitch, whipped him off because it wasn't happening, but then doesn't throw him under the bus because he says in the press conference after the match, I'm asking him to do a job that's not naturally his. It wasn't quite working out. I've switched him out. It's not the player's fault. It just doesn't happen. And I think the players, in alignment with everything we just spoke about, in the last question, makes players believe. It comes back to that belief and that credibility, because you can go, right, we were just, Jack Butland after the cup final, we were lost. Right, well, everybody wants a leader they can believe in, they can get behind, who knows what they're doing. If you get somebody who talks the good game, get somebody who puts their arm on the shoulder and respects you and doesn't tell people not to attend the training ground, doesn't just ostracise people, and actually goes like that, oh, by the way, here's the silverware. That's a recipe for really good stuff in the building, and it is a really good feeling and a complete sea change from where it was 10, 12 weeks ago when things were just imploding. So, yeah, Philippe Clement's style matches the club, and some players it won't match. and they won't be at the club because I don't think there's going to be any other winner rather than Philippe Clement.
Yeah, I definitely think that's the case as well. Ross, Tommy brought up the Todd Cantwell incident. I'm going to ask you about any weaknesses or any areas that you thought, oh, that's a bit strange, or I'll keep an eye on that one going forward. I think the Todd Cantwell substitution was the only one that stuck out to me, and even then it made complete sense once it was explained. So, and you found it hard to argue with it after that. But there was plenty of people around me in the stands that were arguing about it at that precise moment in time that Todd Cantwell was wandering off the pitch. Is there anything that's kind of stuck out, or where you thought, not sure about that one?
Asked me earlier if I was impressed with him. Now you've asked me to try and find some negatives. I'm actually struggling, which is a great sign, isn't it? I'm struggling. I'll be honest, at the time, and I stick by it, I didn't like the Todd Cantwell substitution in the first half, but I understand the reasons behind it. I don't agree with them. I think Todd Cantwell was played out of position that night. He lost the ball a couple of times, but ultimately lost the ball in Aris's half, and Rangers conceded that. I mean, if your attacking player isn't able to take risks just outside the box, then I'm not really sure how we're going to score goals. So I think I understand overall why he made the substitution that night. Not to go too far into this, but I think it was about Sam Lammers that night, wasn't it? Most people were feeling he shouldn't have been in the park. So yeah, I mean, I disagree with him on that, but ultimately, it's all worked out in the end. I think we spoke about this at the weekend after the Motherwell game. I think credit has to go to both sides, right? Philippe Clement has handled that situation really well. He's taken the player out. He's also then protected him in the media, which he didn't have to. He could have clearly went, Todd wasn't doing what I wanted, that's it. He's off, but he explained the situation. But also Todd Cantwell's grabbed that opportunity and he's went, right, well, okay, you're now going to give me the chance to play at number 10. I'm going to show you why I shouldn't be played in the right and I should be played here every time, and he's done that. So again, yeah, it comes back to that man and management point, doesn't it? Something that, yeah, it's quite clear to see that based on rumours and things we've heard over the last couple of weeks, that maybe wasn't there with the last manager. It's quite clear that we have that Philippe Clement, even in the press, in terms of when he's asked about individual players. And he's very, very consistent with this message in terms of if he's asked about an individual player, he says, I'm not, excuse me, sorry, I'm not too bothered about the individual players. It's all about a team for me. And he tries to move past it. And I think the whole idea is that, okay, let's approach this as a team. There's no individuals here. As long as we get the result, it doesn't really matter. And I think that's why you're seeing a wee bit more from the likes of Cyril Dessers now, because that pressure on his shoulders to be the guy that scores goals every week is not there. Of course, you want your striker to score, but ultimately, Philippe Clement wants results, and he's trying to take the pressure off everyone, and he's trying to make sure players go on the pitch and express themselves, and we're seeing more of that now from all individuals. So, yeah, you've asked me to pick a negative there, and I've ended up coming back and talking about his man management. So, of course, that shows you how impressed I am with the manager, Craig.
I saw Tommy smiling away there, so I'll just bring up this comment that's come in. Sharpie Staunch, is Tommy related to Alan McManus, the snooker player? Actually, Sharpie, they are one of the same. Tommy is Alan McManus as an alias.
I did not see it go in that direction. No, obviously Alan gets stopped in the street and says, "Oh, you that Tommy from that Rangers podcast." That's what he gets. No, definitely not. Definitely not. I think Alan's got a wee bit of weight on me as well, truth be told, these days.
Tommy, Ross very skillfully turned have you noticed any weaknesses into talking about more positives? Have you noticed anything that's kind of stuck out to you from Philippe Clement's time in charge as yet that potentially we need to keep an eye on?
We're still dealing with the same problems. I mean, it's fine to say everything's gotten better, right? Performances haven't been naturally stellar. We still know that we don't feel clinical up top. We are a little bit light in midfield. There you go. I mean, that stuff hasn't went away. What Philippe Clement has managed to do is get something going, but you can still see a Dessers having a bad game. You can still see a Lammers being anonymous. You can have a bad game from Sima or whatever. Sima's on really good form, etc. And then you look at the depth of the squad and you go, it's really not quite there. I see RFC 56 talking about Scott Wright, but you've got, young McCausland doing really, really well. But again, a young man, by definition, there might be a drop-off in performance at some point. And Philippe Clement's spoken about trying to protect him physically as well. So I don't think there's anything negative about that. It's just facing into so far Philippe Clement's been able to get everything out that he really needs of them. is there still a question mark over this squad when it comes to the big games? No, I think that's been the sea change. I'm coming to a positive as well, in that out with the Aberdeen game when we had a chance to close the gap. We've taken our chances. We've qualified for the last 16 in a really pressurised environment away in Seville, and then we've won. So it actually, even within all those negatives, he's changed the biggest thing that he could. We keep coming back to mentality, I suppose, right? And I, get lots of this when I'm preparing for my next snooker match. It's all about mentality. You know what I mean? You need to go frame to frame. And to his point, that's all he can do. The next thing is the next thing. And we all know how we react if it's not positive when it comes up against Celtic. So the only negative that Philippe Clement will be looking at is injuries, who's not in the right frame of mind, who can he get the best out of, and then it's the first whistle, and then see how it goes. And then we'll face into what after it. I think anything more than that is not reductive, but it's trying to play into a space that we already know, and that some of these players, whilst he's got a tune out of them, are not going to be first team instruments, and they will be moved on. There we go. Nothing new.
Yeah, Tommy's honorary membership at the Crucible coming in handy there for his snooker terminology.
I don't think we get compared to great people, do we? I think someone said I look like Craig Levine the other day on this podcast.
I'm sure someone called me Pac-Man at one point. So I think we're a thing.
Retired Pac-Man. Now you get the beard and all that, obviously. So retired Pac-Man, a young Craig Levine, and I don't know, a more handsome Alan McManus, obviously. I think
Yeah, moving swiftly on from that one, as we head into a huge game this weekend, Ross, and it's Philippe Clement's first experience of an Old Firm game. It's probably the hardest environment he's going to play an Old Firm game in terms of it being no away fans, in terms of it being that New Year game with quite a lot of pressure on it as well. Kind of going into the Lions Den a little bit on Saturday without any sports. Yes, I said Saturday instead of Sunday there. I was quite impressed with myself there getting that one right. How are you expecting Philippe Clement to approach this game? He doesn't strike me as the type of manager that will go sit in and just try and hit on the counter.
I think you're going to see an approach from Rangers that's probably very similar to Sparta Prague at home. And I think he'll expect Celtic to come flying out the traps, try and press Rangers high, and I think we'll just go over the top of it, to be honest with you, over the first 15-20 minutes. I think we've seen that now, that he's willing to do that. We have the strength of Abdallah Sima on that left-hand side to hit. It looks like it's something that we're always going to utilise. So I think it's going to be a very open game, actually. I think both teams will go for it. And it could probably go either way, to be honest with you. I think it's going to be one of those games. I think he'll relish this, to be honest with you. I think he'll be really, really looking forward to it with the way his team have been playing lately. And obviously the way that Celtic have been playing. Of course, they've picked up a good couple of results the last two, but they had a really poor dip in form. I think he will really believe, regardless of the fans, that Rangers can go there and certainly draw the game, but I think he'll believe that they can win it as well. I think we will be going for it this weekend. And this is one of the reasons why he's joined Rangers, isn't it? To be part of these fixtures. That's why you're attracted to this job. It's a massive club, but the opportunity to play in games like this over the season are huge for anyone coming to this league. So I think Philippe Clement will be quietly confident. I think that's the best way to put it. Even regardless of all the injuries that we have right now, I think he'll still believe there's enough in this squad to go make a dent at Celtic Park. So it's a game I'm really looking forward to. And I'm like I said about the manager, I'm quietly confident about this one.
Yeah, Tommy Ross has said there that he thinks game plan will be quite similar to Sparta Prague. Is that what you expect? So it will be something that we've seen before, or do you reckon he could kind of pull a bit of a rabbit out of the hat and play something a little bit different?
Just before that, just to Louise Wise in the comments. Listen, Louise, not a moan about the team creating chances and missing them, but we know it's an area that we've not been particularly great at, and we do need to get a bit more clinical. But I get your point. Every team does miss chances. But I think even Philippe Clement has identified that we need to be a bit more clinical up front, and I'm willing to go with that. But it's a fair shout. I think Ross is broadly correct. In terms of the style of play, going over the top or not, or we can discuss that back and forward. But Philippe Clement's someone who spends a lot of time looking at the mental side of the game and the psychology of it. And I think he'll be really, really plugged into wanting to quieten them really early. I don't think it'll be a sit back and see how their game plan shakes out. It'll be very much a, right, we're here to implement our style of play onto you, quieten your fans down, move you back into your box, and then let's see where they're. Certainly, our team should not be turning up with any inferiority complex. Celtic will be looking to restart their season. They're in a difficult position. We were looking to capitalise on the momentum. So I know that Philippe Clement will be spending a lot of time making sure that the team are mentally prepared for what will be a hostile environment. There'll be none of us there. And it will be a case of, right, try and get something early, even if that's a chance, moving them up the pitch, whatever. That might mean that we go long, we play over the top, we do some of that, we expose them down the channels, whatever. All I know is that we will go with a high press. I would expect that, and then see what it's going to shake out as. I don't think it'll be reckless, don't get me wrong. I don't think anybody would expect that from a Clement team at this point. But I think we'll be very much a case of, we're here to take 3 points. Not here to settle, not here to be cagey. We're here to continue what we've been doing, which is beating everybody in front of us. Right, come and make it different.
Yeah, it's interesting you touched on that last point in terms of we're here to take 3 points. We're not here to try and scrape a point and run away. There's been quite a few comments actually, some people going back and forward between whether we need to win it or whether you take a draw and you get out of dodge almost, and you go into the second half of the season firing on all cylinders and the opportunity to be ahead given the 2 games in hand. Tommy, how big is this game in the context of the season itself, and obviously where the league title may well end up come May?
Yeah, just to that first point though, I mean, I know it's a bit clunky, right, but I'll stick with my kind of Charles Dickens stuff. That draw scenario is always the ghost of the game future, right? You would take a draw, right? At points, no, nothing changes. Everybody goes in wanting to get the win, right? It's that simple. And then however the game shakes out, that's a worst case scenario. You would take the draw, but everybody's turning up in terms of getting the 3 points. I think it is a really big game, aren't they all, when it comes to the Old Firm games? But there's such a dynamic here. Brendan Rodgers is in a difficult place with his fan base. Their team's not particularly clicking. Both teams are starting for different reasons with different players at the African Cup and stuff like that. Rangers have been on a great run under Clement, invigorated a season that, whilst behind the scenes and with some of us we thought could be salvaged to some extent, did look like it was drifting away from us. I think there's some players in our squad that very much need that momentum. And if it derails, they might derail as well for a little while. And then it's a chance to go into their backyard, beat them, go ahead. In terms of we've got games in hand, etc. as well. And the psychology of that going into what was a terrible start to the season, you turn around and you get to December and you go, wow, that's what it now looks like. And we've already banked the first trophy of the season. For us, it's all about keeping the wheels turning. For them, it's probably about reigniting and showing that they're still a force to be reckoned with because they're taking a few hits. So yeah, and Clement's first one and all that type of good stuff, but he wants to show that he's put some armour around this team and that it can go to the most hostile place that we face in Scotland, take the shots and come out still rolling. I mean, his Rangers tank needs to roll through there and come out the other side with the 3 points inside it. So yeah, it's a huge game. It cannot be understated. Will it be a huge game in terms of the bearing of the title? Maybe a slightly different question. And anything can happen thereafter. Whoever wins, whoever gets beaten, if it's a draw. But in terms of right now, for Clement to keep his foot on the gas and for us to force them into a position and see how they react as a fan base to their manager losing at Parkhead and losing that lead, that'd be interesting. It's a huge match.
Yeah, I've had a few discussions this week with Rangers fans and with Celtic fans, and I do think if we were to go 2-0 up at some point in the game, it would get very tasty inside Celtic Park, and I think that's the view of both of fans from both sides of the city as well, if that were to be the case. Ross, there's a lot of comments talking about Celtic are there for the taking. We need to press them high. We need to implement our game on them rather than letting them implement their game on us. RFC 56 says they're not Real Madrid. We always give them too much respect at Celtic Park. Where do you think that's the case? Do you think we do give too much respect in the away games in recent seasons? And I assume, going by what you spoke about earlier, you expect that to change this time around?
I'm not sure that we give them too much respect. going to Parkhead, to be honest with you, Craig. I think it's just natural in games like this, the Old Firm, that the home team seem to have a bit of momentum when it starts. We've seen that in the fixture at the early part of this season as well. So I don't really think that the Rangers go there with any fear. We've obviously been on the back of a couple of poor results over the last couple of years, and that's something that I'm sure Clement will be looking at, and he will make sure that the squad are well aware that that is not acceptable. And I think a lot of the comments there talking about Celtic being there for the taking, I think they are. I think over the last couple of years under Ange Postecoglou, they had a really strong side. I think we have to admit that. And even though the games are close, they just seem to have the edge. I don't really have that fear this time. I think, especially at the centre halves, I believe Carter Vickers was injured through the week. That's a massive loss for Celtic. That's like us losing Conor Golson for a fixture like this. Of course, he went off against Motherwell. We'll hope he's all right, but that's a huge loss if you're losing a centre back of that quality. So they definitely are there for the taking. I think Rangers will go for it. I spoke about earlier that we'll go over the top of them. I think that what I mean by that is we just won't let Celtic's press as high in the first 15-20 minutes. We'll just try and play for second balls and get up the park, and like we done against Sparta and like we done against Betis, we'll try and press them. And it worked in both of those games. So I think exactly that's the way that the Rangers will play in this one. They definitely won't have any fear. This is a Celtic team that can be got at, and there's a lot of players in that team that are not playing with confidence at the moment, whereas I think it's the opposite for us. I think there's a lot of our players that are playing with renewed confidence this season. So I think, yeah, this is definitely a game that we should be going into looking for the 3 points. I think, coming back to Tommy's point earlier, I don't think this game will dictate where the title goes, to be honest with you, and I don't think that's a negative, because I think the way that things looked previously this season with the points gap and things, I think most Celtic fans would have been looking at this game as the way to clinch the title, to be honest with you, if they got a win. Well, they're not going to have that now. You know, regardless of where the result goes, that this title race will go on into the next few months. So that's a big positive for us. But I think Philippe Clement will look at this as, you know, lay a marker down, really. It's the first time he's coming up against Celtic. He's coming up against Brendan Rodgers. He'll want to really set a marker for the rest of the season that, regardless of the injuries we have, I can still put a squad together that can compete with your side, and we're going all the way in this. We're going to take you right until the final weeks of this season, and that's the way it's got to be. So I think what's good for us in this situation is, in football, you've always got something to lose, I suppose, but really for the context of the season, there's not a lot to lose for Rangers. They've got the 2 games in hand. Of course, you can never rely on actually banking those points. But the form we've been in this season, I'd back us to only get 6 points in those games. So go into it without any fear. Go for it. Celtic will not like if we come to Parkhead and we press them high. You spoke about the fans earlier. They will be tense. They will be tense if we put them under pressure early. I think we've heard from a lot of their fan base over the last couple of weeks they're not really comfortable at the moment, especially from the back. So they're going to have a couple of centre backs in there that are not used to playing a lot of football, and we have to be all over the top of them. So I'm looking forward to seeing it. I think it'll be interesting to see what Clement does. I think, like I said before, he'll go for a Sparta Prague approach. But regardless, whatever he goes for, I think we've got enough to win this game.
Yeah, we'll come on to talk about lineups shortly, and who we think will be in or out. So many injuries in the team, you could probably name 11 players, and that would be it. And we'll end up with the same 11 players. But just a couple of talking points for that one. Tommy, just before I want to talk about the fact that there are no fans and how much of a debacle that was in itself, how big a boost would the 3 points be, do you think?
Well, it'd be huge. I mean, I think we've just discussed some of that as well. Inside the building, it's great for the players. They've went to a difficult venue. They've gotten the 3 points. They've got themselves right into that title race. For Clement and his staff, it's an additional layer of confidence of what they're doing is the right approach. For the board, it's a good bit of breathing space, but also maybe a headache that they need to back their man in January as well. For the fan base, it's fantastic because we can really see it starting to go somewhere, and then we'll turn around to the other side of the city and see them all frenziedly attacking each other to some extent. Yeah, that's what would come from it in terms of if we can go there and get the result. Maybe the one part that we've not spoken about there to some extent, and I think I probably know the answer to this, but result and performance. It would be great to go and dominate them and do whatever. But as with most of these games, I'll take pragmatism. Go there.
It's all about the result. It's all about the result.
Get the points. Yeah, fancy football can come at another point in the season. I just want to go there and grind them down.
Yeah, there's been too many times in games recent years where we've had the performance and not the result, and ultimately that's not how these games work. You just need to get the end outcome that is in your favour, and that's what you need. There's that League Cup final will always be the one you go back to where we dominated every single aspect of that game and lost 1-0, and that's the perfect as symptomatic of exactly why the result is the only thing that matters. So it'll be
Sorry, just on the flip side of that, just very in closing, going back to League Cup, the Aberdeen one, that's the whole point. I like that pragmatic approach, and Philippe Clement's been able to put a little bit of steel and into the team in terms of they can grind out, they can get down into the trenches. I'll take that if that's what it requires.
Yeah, 100%. Tommy, sticking with you. Obviously, we've already discussed a little bit about the fact there's not going to be any Rangers fans there. I kind of wanted to talk about it a wee bit about the process and how that happened. Rangers obviously offered tickets to Celtic for the first Old Firm game of the season. Celtic turned them back on what they deemed to be safety grounds. Rangers then requested tickets for the game this Saturday, with the understanding that the SPFL effectively had to implement a minimum number for each game. It was fully expected that the minimum number would be enforced. It all went through a subcommittee through the SPFL. Subcommittee said yes, absolutely, there should be a minimum number enforced. But then they didn't actually push forward and enforce it. How disappointing is that? How frustrating is that a governing body or the governance around the game has rules but then can't implement them?
Can maybe replace that word with won't, to be brutally honest with you there. Yeah, listen, it's frustrating. It's not surprising though. I mean, every turn our governing body are by different degrees either unsupportive of the club and what they're trying to do, or, and I think this is more frequent, just absolutely inept. Right? There's some clubs who are happy with that and say, right, they can pull certain levers and work certain relationships and deal with that absolute incapacity to run the game. And then there's other clubs who are saying, right, well, let's try and do something about it. Let's have an independent review. Let's actually get the wheels working here. When you've got a chief exec who's got, a 2-year notice period that he gave himself and these types of things in terms of Neil Doncaster. I mean, I've never heard of that. Even, chief executive of Barclays and stuff like that doesn't have this type of thing. It's about as ironclad as it comes. Then, yeah, I mean, what do you want? And that's a shout out, to other fans of other clubs and other clubs themselves. Don't moan. Don't wring your hands and say X, Y, and Z when it happens to you, because we're showing you time and again the people at the top of our game are short-sighted, incompetent, and being paid for it. What do you want? You want a modern, progressive game that actually tries new things, or do you want to just be able to do what we've seen? Yeah, we know the rules are there and they should be backed, but we're not going to back them. Okay, would that have happened to anybody else? Not entirely sure it would have. Can't change right now, so I'd rather concentrate on the game than things that are outside of our reach at this point in time. But it's embarrassing.
It is embarrassing, and I think what happens next in that whole conversation is probably a full podcast in itself. So Ross will be happy that I'm not going to come to him with that question. Instead, I'm going to come to him with...
You would have found the positive in Philippe Clement out of that question, to be honest with you.
We'd have been back to Philippe Clement's high pressing on that one. Ross, I'm going to come to you with the easy task of naming your starting lineup for Saturday. Who do you think will be running out for Rangers at Celtic Park?
Oh, I've not actually really thought about this, so I'm going to have to go through it quickly. I expect to see the normal back five for a game like this in terms of what we've seen so far in the league. So Butland, Tav, Goldson, Balogun and Barisic.
There was no Barisic. Sorry, I've not seen an update on Barisic. There was obviously no Barisic the last couple of games. He wasn't even on the bench at the weekend against Motherwell. He'd went off with an injury prior to those two games. Has there been an update in terms of him being fit or being available? Are we just assuming that he was being rested and he'll be back?
We haven't had an update. I'm just going on what I feel the team's going to be, to be honest with you. Of course, we can't say for sure until the press conference on Friday. But I've got a feeling that Barisic will make it. I think John Lundstrom will make it as well. I think that injury he sustained against St Johnstone was a bit of an impact one. He's probably got a lot of swelling in his ankle. It was a shocking tackle, but I think he'll be ready for this one. Of course, if anyone listens to this closer to the game after the press conference, that might sound a bit silly, but this is where I am at the moment. I think Lundstram will make it. Next to him's an interesting one. I think he probably will go with Dujon Sterling. Kieran Dowell's done really well lately, but I think this type of game, you probably want a Sterling in there. I think he'll go Cantwell in front, and the number 10, he'll put Seaman on the left. I think he'll go with Scott Wright in this one, if he's fit enough. Ross McCausland has done well since he came into the side. Young boy, he's had a wee bit of dip lately. I just think this is maybe a game you can take him out. Scott Wright's got a wee bit of experience in this fixture, and I think they're very similar players in terms of what you're going to get in the overall day. So I think he might go for Scott Wright with this one, and I expect to see Cyril Dessers up front. Really, we don't have a lot of options, Craig, to be honest with you. I'm hoping we get a couple of injured players back, and yes, Scott Wright for coming in for McCausland.
Yeah, Paul McGarrigle in the comments has put up his team. I think the only change from yours is he's got McCausland in there instead of Scott Wright. Interesting, he had Lundstram in there as well. Tommy, I was of the impression actually Ryan Jack would be more likely to play than John Lundstram, just going by how press conferences have gone beforehand and how close Philippe Clement has said Ryan Jack is to being back. How important is it that we have, just before we get your team lineup, how important is it that we at least have one of Lundstram or Jack in there just to have that bit of experience in these fixtures and playing these kind of games?
Definitely. And Lundstram, probably the pick of the two of them. I know Philippe Clement's got a lot of respect for John Lundstram in the dressing room and on the pitch, and sees him as somebody who can implement the messages really, really clearly. Maybe something we don't naturally associate with John Lundstram, but he's a really clever footballer. He can get the message and get it to his teammates. So I think that's the preference. You're absolutely right, though. I mean, either of those two needed. I think if people are fit or close to fitness, they'll go in. I'm probably with Paul there. I'm not entirely convinced that Scott Wright will start. I think sticking with McCausland, he's not done anything wrong. Why drop him, so to speak? I'm sure Ross would be able to give me a few reasons for that, and I could probably drum up some myself as well. But if you've got somebody at that age, okay, well, you've said that you want to stick with people, so I think he will stick with them. It could be that he moves it about slightly and tries to find a space for Dowell to come in as well. But given that he's showed up really well, that powerful running into the box, that extra goal threat, which is something that we could always do with. I mean, do you end up with a midfield that's got a little bit of flexibility in it, which has got a Sterling, a Cantwell, a Lundstram, a Dowell, just to allow a little bit of a different shape and allow people to come in and out of where they're sitting? There's a possibility of that. So, I mean, that could impact McCausland as well. But I think if people are fit and make it, there won't be any dramatic changes to what we've seen previously. Question mark over Borna Barisic and Ridvan, though, obviously.
I'm not sure which one I'd prefer out of those two either, to be fair. They each have their own weaknesses.
I think you're right, just for the sake of that conversation, though. That one in particular, if it's Barisic or Ridvan, might impact who's in front of them in the midfield as well, because it'll be a slightly different style of play. And yeah, that might just change a little bit the personnel as well.
Yeah, I think so. It's been interesting. I think the real discussion point is that centre of midfield and who's in there. We know that if you win the centre of midfield, you're going to have a really good chance of winning the games like this, and we know how important that place is, and that's why I think we're all saying that we hope that one of the more experienced players that have been there and done it before has a chance to play and at least I was going to say shepherd one of the newer guys or younger guys, so or guide a Dujon Sterling or a Kieran Dowell through the game, because we know how hyped up some players can get in these games, and the last thing you want is one to lose their head or just find themselves out of position or whatever just because they're caught up in the atmosphere. So I think I'm more towards Paul's lineup. I think McCausland will play. We chatted on the Motherwell post match about how McCausland hasn't been setting the header alight the last few games. He's kind of been kept in there despite Clement saying he wasn't going to play every 3 days. I thought tonight's game against Ross County was going to be the one that he missed out on, to be honest. I thought Scott Wright would have started tonight against Ross County, and then that would have given that option. If Scott Wright played well, then potentially he stays in for Saturday. If he doesn't, then McCausland's back in there. The real question though is, and I'll come to both of you for this one, what time are we getting our penalty? Ross, I'll come to you first of all.
I can't believe you just asked me this. Well, if I have to pick a minute, it's got to be last minute, doesn't it? A last minute penalty winner. Yeah, so I'll go 93 for a Rangers penalty.
If it's a 93rd minute penalty, are you watching it?
Absolutely not. No. I can't. Honestly, even at Ibrox, sometimes I struggle to watch penalties when Tav steps up. So yeah, I'll be behind the couch for that one, I think.
What about you, Tommy?
Very much depends. I'll speak to Nick Walsh tomorrow, and when I meet him for a drink, and find out what he's thinking is on that. But I'll go for somewhere in the 80 odd minutes, 86, 87, something like that, when it's on a fine knife edge, and we just need a wee bit of a nudge to get us over the line of the 3 points.
Yeah, I think we're all in the same minds there. Just need a wee bit of helping hand. So 75 minutes onwards.
75 minutes onwards. Right, I like that. There we go. Get your bets in.
There we go. We spoke about effectively, as long as we don't come out of the weekend with a defeat, then it's the positivity continues. Ross, what's your score prediction for Saturday?
Oh, here we go. I think Rangers will actually have enough to get this one over the line. I'm going to go 2-1 Rangers. I think it'll be tight. I think there'll be a lot in the game. I'm sure there'll be a lot of controversy, as there always is, if Rangers get a result. So I'm going to go for 2-1 Rangers.
I'm going to go for 1-0 Rangers. Tommy, where are you landing on this?
I was probably going towards the 2-1 to Rangers, actually, but for the sake of three different answers, that penalty will make it 3-1. So there we go, and that gets us over the line.
There you go. Keeps us all happy and celebrating into the new year. I think we'll round it off there. We're just encroaching on sort of the hour mark there, so we'll leave off the podcast there. Thank you very much to Ross and Tommy for joining us for this Old Firm preview and a bit of a wider look at Philippe Clement's time at Rangers so far. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Thank you very much for all your comments as well. There's been loads of them coming in, and great to hear your views as always. Please remember to like the video if you've enjoyed the content. Subscribe to the channel so you get a notification every single time we go live or a new videos uploaded. We'll be back at the weekend. I think the time's still to be confirmed, depending on how much alcohol has been consumed by people on the podcast. But hopefully it'll be shortly after the Old Firm game, and we'll be celebrating with all of you as well. But hope you enjoy the rest of your festive break, and until next time, goodbye.